I think that's part of middle axis personality style. Middle, upper, outer. That same kind of controllingness can really translate into can shift from just the ability to get things done to really being pretty dictatorial about things to the point of being sadistic to other people at times if there's significant split. And that is a personality style where sadism starts sort of becoming an active sadism. Middle, outer, lower, you're beginning to get into sort of often passive-aggressive, oppositional sort of stuff, sort of constant struggle and tussle with things. Actually, this is the personality style that where, and actually it's only in part, it's actually a positive part as well as a symptom part. It's sort of the outlaw within the creative whole, comes from middle, lower, outer. But the outlaw is in moderation a creative part of middle axis. I mean, I love the quote of Jesse James. I mean, he says, "Everybody loves an outlaw. You should never forget them." You know? We're constantly talking about outlaws. We love outlaws. Okay, so it's not like it's a problem. If there's too much splitting off, okay, from middle, lower, outer, then you get somebody who's a criminal, and that's different than an outlaw. And at that point, they become a real problem to society. So you get a real antisocial kind of split in middle, lower, outer when there's a high degree of splitting happening. Middle, lower, inner. Again, depression is a very common symptom. It has a different kind, it has a different quality than early access depression. Early access depression is more that wet kind of depression. The depression of middle axis is more sort of stuck in the mud and can't get the wheels rolling. And it's sort of an inner struggle-y kind of depression. Also passive dependency sometimes there, that kind of loyalty that's an inherent part, a kind of commitment that's an inherent part of a middle, lower, inner can simply become passivity if there's a significant amount of splitting going on. Okay. How about body structure? What's going on bodily? Okay, here we're definitely making a movement to a different body, really. We're moving out of that sort of magical essence, energy, spirit body of early axis, much more into the visceral, muscular body now of middle axis. And basically, the more you're moving toward the archetypally masculine that, the more towards you're moving upward and outward, the more that's very much in the musculature. And the more you're moving toward the archetypally feminine, inward and downward, the more you're moving into the more visceral aspects bodily. Okay? So the basic body structure with middle axis, it certainly stopped being childlike now. It's a tougher body. It tends to be a less fine-featured body. And it tends to have often a significant muscle mass. It tends to have a kind of square feeling to it, and often significant muscle mass, and more muscle mass than you would expect for the amount of exercise that someone does, for the simple reason that the person is doing isometrics most of the time, which is the greatest way to build muscle mass. Okay? So middle, upper, outer, there you're going to see a tendency toward a square, broad-shouldered kind of look. Okay, I see a lot of muscle mass in the jaw, in the shoulders, in the chest, upper arms frequently. Okay. Middle, upper, inner, you still get that squareness, but now there's more heart along with that muscle. So you get, you look at the classic Irish priest, for example. I mean, he ain't a wimp. He's tough. He can handle it. But he's also got a lot of heart. It's that sort of combination of the steadfastness and the heart together that is the priest's particular beauty. You move lower, middle, lower, and you begin to become much more into the viscera. And here you've got someone who's really got guts. Okay, and soldiers are talked about as grunts. Okay, and it's like very visceral words, especially middle, lower, outer, are expressions of where home is. A bunch of folks talking around telling fart jokes, you can be sure that it's middle, lower, outer. Because middle, lower, outer are the only people who enjoy fart jokes.
I didn't know any.
Okay, then as we move more middle, lower, inner, we're much more in sort of the belly of things, but not the belly in the early lower sense of belly. It's a bit more stomach belly, good food on the table belly, and you're also going to have again more muscle mass than one would expect. There tends to, for example, frequently get a lot of muscle mass in the thighs, muscle mass in the buttocks, in middle, lower, inner styles. Okay. Also, middle, lower, inner frequently a bit overweight again, but it has a different quality than early lower adipose tissue. It's solider, and you almost say the person's solid rather than overweight. Okay. Well, other kinds of comparisons to other kinds of diagnostic systems. Certainly, you've got such things as a sadistic personality, some kinds of obsessive personality, passive-aggressive personality, passive-dependent personality, depressive personality. Those are the main ones. Freud does very good talking about middle axis dynamics. Freud has sort of balance between middle axis and late axis dynamics in his personality styles. He addresses those kinds of control-oriented issues very well. So, I invite you to take some time and be middle axis. See how you need to be in yourself to appreciate that part of the whole and what it has to offer, what we are together on this planet. Okay, move back into your own space a bit and begin to say, okay, what do you notice about that reality? What was important in it?
Oh, you're the president. You're good. You guys really look at me.
No. What was home in that? What were the values that were important? What did the people seem like? What did your world seem like to you? What were the richnesses you felt? What were the partialities you felt?
It was very sociable, I thought.
It was.
I mean,
Okay.
Julie and I started to try and do a dyadic thing here, and it just felt real important to be with everybody else. At least I
Okay. Very much a sense of community. The flip side of that is that if somebody had become your enemy, they very quickly would have become another group without question. Same thing.
You noticed
community.
it.
You had an enemy.
I noticed we were all standing up, on the floor, kind of rolling around. There was this conversation going on in the meet, and I was still down here immediately. I was just up.
Where were you feeling in your body from as you were talking? Where were you talking from? Just from your heart, chest, belly.
More upper, I know.
Okay. Well, the emphasis was more upper. There wasn't as much playing in the more lower pole aspects of middle axis, that's why we're not suggested to move beyond sort of caricaturing it, because we caricature middle axis as kind of tough and like that. But in fact, middle axis has its sides that are indeed very quiet and just very family loving and very basic value, close to the earth.
I had trouble dealing with words. It's like I wanted to go by the fire and kind of.
All right. Well, I will need to say my partings, because for this next piece, I am certainly not adequate to the task. And careful. So I'm going to invite in my other brother. He's He's a bit of a sort of those sort of secular humanist types. He's okay though, sort of sometimes. Anyway, it'll take him a little longer because he's got to get dressed and ready to come, and so, and you know how he is.
Charlie,
So.
like we've never seen him before.
Yeah, right. I can't wait.
This is close to the Charlie.
I think it's
So, see you in a bit.
I think Charlie could have left on his gray sweater and his Red Sox.
But then Dean allowed us to do that. He forced us to do that. It was part of the vision. It was part of the vision. It was part of the vision. You can take it from that end.
It's time to start.
Yeah, I think so too.
I swear. Got it.
But she's still the Red Sox. He doesn't even have Red Sox.
No, he does.
Dr. Johnston.
Well, good evening.
Oh, no.
I've heard you're a fun, sharp group.
That's the other spider.
In moving to the late axis, we move from crude form into real form, into clear, objective material form. So that begins to bring qualities into the personality style of the ability to deal well with detail, the ability to think clearly, the ability to use words with some complexity and some precision, the ability to think clearly. Ultimate ability to deal with questions of finish and polish. The X's person is concerned with how things look. So let's make our way around the clock, the late axis. Late upper inner is again concerned with inner experience and experience in the light. But from late upper inner, for the most part, that is now not a religious experience as much as it is a philosophical experience. So this is the personality style, for example, that you're going to find most commonly in someone who is a university professor. Okay? Your interest is with understanding. With a clear delineation of understanding. We've been inclusive in terms of the details in understanding. And as much as possible, eliminating one's personal biases in understanding. Okay? This is understanding in the real world. In the objective world. It's also a personality style that we would see in more liberal theological situation of liberal Protestant minister, and in that aspect of theology, which is in fact really more concerned with philosophy of life than rules of how one should act, concerned more with questions of right action, good deeds, rather than sin or mystical kinds of things. Okay. As we move from late upper inner to late upper outer, that capacity for keen discernment in the material shifts from the inner materiality of the rational to shift into the outer materiality of the world. So this is the personality style, for example, that you're going to find most often, for example, in the corporate boardroom. This is somebody who can deal well with question of ultimate material abstractions, such as money. Have you read the Wall Street Journal this morning? No, you haven't. And also deal well with a very different kind of management, because it's now less the management of people than it is the management of institutions. The management of structures. Okay, often on a very grand scale, well beyond the personal. Okay. And from this personality style, for example, I can feel very at home on the 43rd floor of the Columbia Building in a world of glass and stainless steel. This feels like home. Okay. Clear delineation. Okay. Nothing messy there. I can also feel very at home flying all over the world, because any place is equally my home. I'm quite happy in an airport on a jet airliner. Okay. The world is my home. I'm a global citizen. Okay. This is the personality style that's most worldly. And most sophisticated in its way. As we move from late upper outer to late lower outer, that worldliness, that in the worldness, begins to take on a very different kind of form. And this is the form now of in the world as the ability to project oneself, as the ability to be on stage and love being on stage. This is the personality style of most people who are performers in the media. This is my best approximation of my Don Johnston look. I don't come real close, but here I can do on stage. Oh, yes, that's right. That's one I'd forgotten. You also see late lower outer people are also people often into athletics, but very much white collar athletics. So people who are tennis players, golfers. If anybody's been watching the Winter Olympics lately, most people who are figure skaters are late lower outer. People you talk about, somebody you talk about something they really have personality. Okay. Personality is a late lower outer word. Okay, somebody's got personality. They've got pizzazz. They know how to project. Okay, I mean you can see them this far out in front of them. Okay, all right. So yeah, newscaster. It's the newscaster. Most people in the media, and with that. Those people who really have pizzazz and sort of some of the function of being kind of often sort of society's cheerleaders, you know, people who really speak from a place of getting enthusiasm going in things. Okay, so there is late lower outer as best I can do it. As we begin to move late lower inner, we still have some of that sort of ability to be on stage and love of being on stage. Notice it's the outer world there that becomes the real world. It's the world of one's audience. It's the world of one's material things that become the real world, and that's where the eroticism comes through that connection there. As you begin moving more inner, lower inner, we begin moving into it somewhat more feeling aesthetic kind of place. And this is a personality style that is quite common, for example, in certain kinds of visual artists, more literal visual artists, frequently somebody who is paints portraits or landscapes or something like that. In dance, modern dancers are the great majority of modern dancers are lower inner personality style. Ballet folks have a bit more upper pole, but still largely that kind of personality style. So there's a kind of artistry as stage performance artistry rather than media, okay, that is much of the late lower inner personality style. This is also the most romantic personality style. So, this is the kind of person who is most going to fully enjoy and appreciate an evening at a fine restaurant, candlelit dinner, and sharing a glass of Chardonnay. So, so what are some of the special richnesses of late axis? Okay. An ability for clarity. Ability to step back from things, not take things personally. An ability to think clearly, to be eloquent, to be polished. An ability to deal with detail and deal with things very much in the world. And also an ability to just bring enthusiasm to things, okay? Not make things too heavy. Lighten up. Hey, have fun. It's a different kind of fun than early access fun, okay? It's fun. And really the ability to project, to communicate, to be good communicators. Important part of late access. How are some of the partialities in late access? Certainly it's a little bit easy to get sufficiently heady that one's not that much in touch with other parts of life. One can also get a bit on the materialistic side, such that one is missing on other parts of life, sort of yuppie syndrome. There's often also a kind of superficiality, at least it's perceived superficiality from other personality styles. It's not necessarily felt that way within late access. But it is the case that the late access experience is in the same sense that early access was kind of pre-personal. There's a sense in which late access is post-personal. Okay. So it's very easy when being with a late access person to feel like one's being treated as an object in some kind of way. Feel someone's calculating. Late access folk could also get very achievement-oriented in a way that can be very narrow. Kinds of symptoms. Okay, late upper inner. Most common one is simply hyper-intellectualization, being in one's ivory tower. And in that easily sort of being above it all. Late upper outer related, but that's more sort of hyper-materiality in a way. And within our culture, that kind of personality style is often not seen as symptomatic just because of the values of the culture. But increasingly we're becoming sensitive to the kinds of symptomatic issues of that sort of personality style, manifesting in kinds of notions like stress reaction and burnout and such as that, where we're beginning to more and more acknowledge the partialities that can happen within that kind of personality structure. Late lower outer kinds of symptoms. Late lower in general, we can also have sort of stress burnout kinds of symptoms. Along with that, there's often a tendency when a person's strongly polarized to really get into kind of melodrama and sort of soap opera kinds of things. Also, frequently, simply some sort of emotional seductiveness in lots of kinds of ways. Body dynamics. Upper pole, one's tending to live largely in one's head. And so this is a personality style where to the greatest degree, rather than being a body, one has a body. Okay? And if one takes good care of it, one treats it well, clothes it well, feeds it well, but in a certain sense, it's an object that one wants to have as a well-oiled machine. Okay? The relationship to a body. Body structure tends to be quite tight, which is different. It's different than the isometric tension of middle axis. It's sort of fine tone and tight tone. Okay? Tend toward the thin. Okay? And late access people tend to be very concerned about not getting fat. So they count their calories to make sure they don't get fat. Fat is too early, too lower. Okay, it's not liked. It's not clean. As you begin to move into late lower, you get a different kind of body dynamic happening, and there one shifts from being up in one's head as much to increasingly being one lives very much at the surface of one's body. It's like one's projecting from one's body all the time. It's pretty much the whole of one's body at the same time. Okay, maybe a little bit more toward the head, just tends to be that way, but the whole of the body has a sense of projection to it. And with that projection, often a sense of sexuality, of flirtatiousness along with that. It's a more genital stage in personality styles. And the flirtatiousness is interesting in terms of the body because it often has this really misperceive the body that we're seeing, because late lower people particularly are good enough at projecting that kind of flirtatiousness that one can imagine that they have an incredible body, whether man or woman, and then you look beneath the surface and you notice it's just that they're moving well and they're projecting well, and that's mostly what you're seeing what's outside the body that's giving you that kind of response. And frequently, late lower folk, if they have, especially if there's significant splitting, may be very seductive, and at the same time have a very low capacity for both intimacy and significant sexual gratification and fulfillment in their functioning. So there's that very much a contradiction in the message. Now, frequently the sexual signals that are put out have nothing to do with sexuality, per se. They have to do with wanting acknowledgement and response, wanting an audience, wanting someone to be there, notice that they're there. Okay. Some kind of achievement somewhere. Okay. Relationship to other kinds of diagnostic systems, upper pole, obsessive personalities, common. Lower pole can have some of that, also hysterical personality. Those are the most common ones we associate with late axis. Okay. Well, why don't you take some time to stand up and move around as a late axis person, and again do your best, rather than to caricature it, to live in it and to appreciate that reality and play with the different parts of it. Play with the upper pole parts, play with the lower pole parts. See the degree you can know that world. Gregariousness is another part of late axis.
Right. And we did not get back in here?
I realized I didn't show a body diagram for late axis, and so this middle part here with the head is sort of upper pole aspect, where you really have a focus bodily on the head. Okay? And then with lower pole, very much more on the surface of the body.